So Jeff Pearlman writes New York Times bestsellers for a living. I think I was first introduced to him years ago in America was Boys Will Be Boys. It was the controversial book because it told the truth about the Cowboys. There was a book about Walter Payton, Barry Bonds, the anti-hero, gunslinger, Brett Favre. Exhaustive research. I mean, just like it's scuba diving. It is get the gear on and go a million miles deep. Well, the new book is Three-Ring Circus. And what's great about dynasties in sports is they never get old. They just don't. You could read about dysfunction on dynasties. I just read a Patriots book, and it's like it's just incredible. I just can't get enough on dynasties. And obviously the Shaq, Kobe, Jerry West, Phil Jackson, a lot of egos, a lot of greatness, and Jeff Pearlman, Three-Ring Circus. The book is now out, and he is joining us live. So, it's funny, Jeff. Usually dysfunction punctures momentum. And Kobe and Shaq, different backgrounds, a lot of dysfunction, but they made it work for quite a while. How did they make it work?
The number one thing is they had two of the five most talented guys on the court at all times. And that's a huge thing. I just think they chose to coexist, not lovingly, but they chose to coexist. And I really think what the Lakers did, the most important thing they did, is they always had these role players who doubled as almost like guidance counselors. So whether it was Derek Harper, Rick Fox, J.R. Reed, John Sally, on and on, Ron Harper, there are always guys who are there to kind of soothe things over in the locker room. Bryant Shaw, guys like that. And it just made a world of difference. So even though it's funny because Shaq and Kobe occupied their own orbits in that locker room, and the media would go to Shaq and he would say something about Kobe, and then they would go to Kobe, and it was the most passive aggressive nonsense ever, truly ludicrous. But these guys, these veterans, were all able to handle it well and sort of work it out so it was okay. It wasn't that big a deal. And also, Phil Jackson, to his credit, like when Kurt Rambis was the interim coach, Shaq's big complaint was he needs to stop babying Kobe. And Phil Jackson didn't baby Kobe. He kind of let it be. He let these guys run the locker room, and it kind of worked.
So I remember when Shaq was in college. In fact, I talked to Jerry Tarkanian. I was in Vegas, and he told me about Shaq. He said, there's a kid down in Louisiana. He's going to change the game. But Kobe was different. He grew up in Italy. He was a high school player. We didn't know much about him. It wasn't a time when you drafted a guard out of high school, okay? So, yeah. Jerry, you don't think about it as a risk, but Jerry West drafts a high schooler, makes a trade with Charlotte. Why? Was there any misgivings? Was he nervous? Was there any doubt for Jerry West with Kobe when he's 18?
All right, so it's the best thing ever. So it's all John Calipari's fault. So John Calipari is a coach of the Nets. He's a young coach, first year. And they have decided they are going to draft Kobe Bryant with the 8th pick in the 96 draft. It is a lock. That is who we are drafting. And John Nash is the general manager. They're all on board. They've brought Kobe in 4 times. They love him. Leading up to the draft, they actually meet with Kobe's parents. And they're like, we're going to draft your son. And Joe and Pam Bryant are like, that's great. He'll be nearby. Day before the draft, Kobe Bryant calls John Calipari on his own and says, I want to get away from my family. I don't want to play in New Jersey. I don't want you to draft me. Kobe's agent calls John Calipari and says, yeah, if you guys draft Kobe, he probably won't play this year, or he might go to Italy. Calipari's freaking out. He's like, oh my God. He goes to John Nash, the GM. He's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. What are we going to do? John Nash, you need to calm down. It's all just a bluff. It's just a bluff. Kerry Kittles out of Villanova is represented by David Falk. David Falk calls John Calipari and says, Kerry really wants to play with you guys. If you don't draft him, if he's there, I'm never going to have a player go to you again. Calipari is freaking out. He goes into John Nash. John, I don't know what we're going to do. John Nash is like, Cal, you need to calm down. It's all just a bluff. And behind the scenes, there's this whole mechanism to get Kobe to LA because he already signed a deal with Adidas. They don't want him playing in the swamps in New Jersey. They want him in LA. Jerry West is friends with Kobe's agent, Arn Tellem. And John Nash is telling Cal, we got to do this. We got to do this. We have to draft him. He's going to change the franchise. It's a day morning of the draft. John Calipari, who has in his contract his final personnel say, gathers everyone around and he says, I've made a decision. If Kerry Kittles is there at number 8, we're going to take Kerry Kittles. And if he's not there, we're going to take Kobe Bryant. And John Nash just does one of those and puts his hands in his head. Of course, Kerry Kittles is there at number 8. I talked to Kittles. Kittles was like, I played with Kobe in the summer. I would have drafted Kobe too. They end up drafting Kerry Kittles. Jerry West is doing a freaking dance in his office because he knows the next 4 picks are not going to be Kobe Bryant. He has his deal worked out with Charlotte, and he ends up trading Vlade for the rights to Kobe. And he says to Jerry Buss, right after that happens, I just got you the best player in this draft, because they had worked out Kobe twice, once against Michael Cooper, once against Dante Jones. And it was the best 2 workouts Jerry West had ever seen.
Wow. How about that? You know, when you do these books, I mean, again, it's scuba gear. You deep dive. There's always a crazy story. You have to find. I mean, you have hundreds of sources per book. Was there who did you track down that was crazy? What was the craziest story in the book?
I mean, my favorite track down. I love the track downs. And J.R. Ryder, you know, he was a Laker for 1 year. People forget J.R. Ryder was a Laker for 1 year. Former slam dunk champ. So J.R. Ryder, who I love, I actually really love. He twice in his career, when writers wrote something that he did not like, actually said to them, I know where your family lives. That was his threat to them. I know where your family lives. All I had was an address for J.R. Ryder. I did not have a phone number. And I was going to be in Arizona. So I decided I'm going to drive to J.R. Ryder's house. And I drive out there. I get there like 9:30, which is a little early, but that's okay. I knock on the door. A kid answers. I have my USFL book with me. I'm like, hey, is J.R. Ryder here? He's like, hold on. A woman comes to the door. I'm like, hey, my name's Jeff Pearlman. I'm a writer. Is J.R. Ryder here? She goes, hold on. They close the door. I hear her and a guy, adult male, yelling at each other. And then the door opens and there's J.R. Ryder. And he goes, who are you? And I'm like, hey, my name's Jeff Pearlman and I'm a writer and I'm doing a book about Bro, are you effing kidding me? Bro, you just knock on my door. Are you kidding me? He opens the door and comes out and he's like this far away from me. And he's like, bro, that is not cool. And I'm convinced at this moment I'm about to get punched by J.R. Ryder. And he goes, what's that book you have? And I'm like, oh, it's a book I did about the USFL. And is that Trump? Is that Trump? I'm like, yeah, Trump owned a team. What are you working on? I'm like, well, I'm doing a book about the Lakers during the Shaq Kobe years. All right, man. I'll talk to you. He ends up giving me 2 hours.
Wow.
J.R. Ryder. And he was awesome. And I just want to say the best story ever is J.R. Ryder's playing for the Lakers and they're on the road and he oversleeps. And he asked the front desk clerk to write him a note to give to Phil Jackson explaining that he did not get a wake-up call. So literally J.R. Ryder arrives at practice and gives Phil Jackson a note, like a student late for class, that says, Dear Coach Jackson, we are sorry on behalf of whatever hotel was the Hyatt. We regret that we were unable to provide J.R. Ryder with the requisite wake-up call. It is our fault. And he gives it to Phil Jackson as his excuse for not being on practice on time.
These are the kind of stories you get. It's a great book. It's called Three-Ring Circus with Jeff Pearlman. You know, it's when you read the book, Shaq and Magic Johnson has this quality too. Magic likes you to ask for help. Like if Magic's offended if you move to LA and don't ask him for help. And I think Shaq wanted to be a little bit of a father figure for Kobe, right? Like not only the physical stature he was so big, but he went to college but it didn't work that way. And why? Tell the audience why, because I think Shaq wanted that and would have been comfortable with that, but it didn't work that way.
I talked to a guy named Mike Penberthy. Do you remember Mike Penberthy?
Yes, I know. Yes, I do.
He was he played with the Lakers for a year, and he went to Masters College. And he told me when he first got to the Lakers, he had he made the team, and he didn't have a suit. He only had a jacket he bought at Nordstrom's off the rack. And Shaq sees him wearing this jacket, and he says, Mike, do you own any suits? And Penberthy's like, I don't. Shaq's like, tomorrow, meet me here. And he brings his personal suit maker, his outfitter, and he pays for 6 of Mike Penberthy's suits.
Wow. Yeah.
When Shaq was teammates with Mark Madsen, he would go around and ask women if they were Mormon and if they were single, so he could introduce them to Mark Madsen, who was Mormon and single. Like, he would fly people in, the parents of teammates in, to see their kid's first game in the NBA. He would pay for the funerals of teammates' parents. Penberthy said to me, he's the best teammate who's ever existed, just the best teammate who ever existed. And that's what he wanted to be. To his credit, he just wanted to be that. And Kobe comes along, and Kobe's first introduction to the Lakers is first training camp in Hawaii. Dale Harris is a coach. All the players gather around, and they introduce each other. So it's like, hey, I'm Nick Van Exel. I'm Eddie Jones. I'm Kobe Bryant. I played at Lower Merion last year, and nobody here is going to punk me. Like, that was his introduction to Lakers. Nobody here is going to punk me. He's 18 years old. And Kobe just wants him to say, can we go out to dinner? Can you help me with this? I don't understand this. And it just wasn't who he was. And Shaq kind of had this thing in his head. I'm Batman. Kobe's going to be Robin. I'm Big Brother. He's going to be Little Brother. But it just wasn't who Kobe Bryant was. And you're right. You are 100% right. The Magic Shaq comparison is a really good one. He just wanted you to ask, and he just wanted to be loved. And Kobe was not someone who did that.
By the way, Jeff adds a prologue to the book. The book had been written when Kobe passed, so he adds some texture and context to that as well. It's in the book. The book is called Three-Ring Circus. What I love about this stuff, there's a shot of the book. It's interesting now that LeBron's in town. The Lakers are a fascinating legacy. You've had, there was kind of the flaky wilt into the sort of academic, prickly Kareem, into everybody loves Magic, into bigger-than-life Shaq, and then there was there's Magic, and then there's kind of the aloof prodigy Kobe, and now it's LeBron. And I know, you're not writing a book with LeBron in mind, but I love your take on this, is that what's fascinating about the Lakers dynasty is all these superstars have been unique. They're all there is a Magic Shaq thing that's kind of similar, but yes. You're kind of feeling on how if the Lakers won the title, Jeff, how Kobe and Magic were so deeply embedded into the lore of the franchise. Here comes LeBron moving into town. He's already won titles. If he wins, what does it mean for the Lakers? How much of a Laker is LeBron, in your opinion?
It's so funny. I have a 20-year-old nephew named Jordan, and he's always like, LeBron is the greatest Laker ever, right? And it's like, no, what are you talking about? No. I feel like in history, we're always going to think of LeBron first and foremost for Cleveland.
Yes.
I just think it's a guarantee, and that's what it is. And I feel like that's the big difference here, is that when you think of Kobe, he's a Laker. When you think of Magic, he's a Laker. Even Shaq with the 4 years in Orlando, he's a Laker. Wilt Chamberlain, who played in Philly, a Laker. Jerry West, a Laker. And I do think the big difference here is his legacy will be great. He'll have brought the Lakers a title. It's wonderful. I just don't think he goes down the same way, because I don't think he will be thought of as a Laker, a career Laker. And I think here in LA, that really means something. Not just that you played here, but that you, like Kobe, when he died, I'm a native New Yorker. I've lived here for 6 years. The thing that just did it for me and shocked me is how much people felt that death. And they felt like it wasn't just a star dying. It was an icon dying. It was a part of LA dying.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if LeBron has that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I don't. Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. When Kobe passed away, as somebody that lives in Los Angeles, I was in an airport. I just landed. I literally was sick to my stomach. I went to the back of a restaurant. It was very emotional. Like I felt like Los Angeles lost something. He was so Los Angeles. It's very much, it feels Troy Aikman Dallas. Like Aikman, he sounds like he's from Dallas. He looks like he's from Dallas. He is Dallas. And I'm with you. I think LeBron is remarkable, but the depth of that relationship with fans. Speaking of depth, the book is called Three-Ring Circus. There's dozens of stories. Jeff writes a book every couple years. We bring him on. Strongly recommend it. And boy, I'll tell you, it's a dynasty with egos and stories and conflict, and you get all of it there. Jeff, it's great talking to you again. I haven't seen you in a while. Keep safe for you and your fam, your kids and your wife, and continued success.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure being here. I appreciate it.
The book is out. Three-Ring Circus.